Is Samsung's Galaxy S22 a hit or a miss?
And what's Starlink's satellite broadband really like in the bush?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support.
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading tech journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined, as usual, by Adam Turner. Hey, Adam, in the great news category, delivered by an aging bald man as it happens, apparently Futurama is coming back yet again. Truly, it's the show that will never die. If you could pick, what defunct TV series would you like to see recommissioned?
Oh man, you've really got to be careful what you wish for here. They've brought back a lot of shows with mixed results. Even some of the late Futurama wasn't the best, and the longer Red Dwarf dragged on the worse it got. But if I had to risk it, I'd say a woke remake of Gilligan's Island, where Ginger is the scientist, the professor is the beefcake, and Mr. Howell is forced to be their butler.
Wow. So they're going for like a 3-day Airbnb stay.
Yeah, I watched the hell out of that.
If anyone's listening, Adam's concept is available for sale now. I don't think we hold the rights to that, but look, it's the internet. Who holds the rights to anything anyway? This week, joining us in the virtual Vertical Hold studios is the one and only Jen Dudley-Nicholson from News Corp. Jen, what would be your pick for a TV show ripe for a revival?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer needs to come back. Like it left it, and there were so many Slayers, and none of them were able to make their own TV show. Like that just seems ridiculous.
I somehow I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, so did I. I was almost going to interrupt and say Buffy on her behalf.
I appreciate that. I mean, I did. I'm just without boasting, although I'm totally boasting. I did have a website called Slayer Sheila. Feel free to look that one up in the archives.
Will do. Could be a bit awkward getting that showrunner back right at the moment, though. I mean, that does seem to be a problem.
It's a full reboot.
Right, full reboot, new people. Let's make it happen.
Exactly.
Speaking of making it happen, Samsung's fresh off taking the rather see-through wraps of its Galaxy S22 and Galaxy Tab S8 lines at its Galaxy Unpacked launch, not long before we recorded this, in fact. And Jen's going to help us dissect the good and bad of Samsung's new lineup directly. But first, our soup du jour, sort of. We've talked a lot about Australian broadband on the show, mostly around the NBN. But what do you do when the NBN leaves you high and dry? You look for other alternatives. And we've talked about Starlink's offering on the show before, but what is it like to actually use? We caught up with Player Two's Matt Hewson to talk the realities of using Starlink in the bush. Hey Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Talk about some internet in difficult situations.
So yours was a fairly unique situation because when I said you're using Starlink in the bush,
Yeah.
you're sort of only just in the bush in your situation, aren't you?
Yeah, really am. I've moved out to my in-laws' farm while we do some renovations at my house. It's going to take about 6 months. So we've moved out to the farm, which is about 10 minutes out of Canberra. 10 to 15 minutes. I'm actually closer to my work at the farm than I was at my home.
So you're not exactly in the middle of nowhere.
But so I'm not in the middle of nowhere. No, not at all. For those that know the area, it's in between Bungendore and Canberra. It's a nice little spot, lovely area. But of course, because you're 5 seconds out of town, there's no internet.
So I guess people's first thought there would be, well, isn't that what NBN either wireless or satellite is for?
Well, it's supposed to be. And I tried to get originally the NBN satellite, but because another building on the same property already had NBN satellite, they basically said, no, go away. I don't know why. They didn't give me a reason. That was just what the answer was.
So I guess most people's next protocol might have been mobile broadband.
1 bar of 4G, it's not quite good enough.
Not with a family and a gaming site to run.
No, not with daily content to do and videos to upload and all those sort of things. So it made life very difficult.
So you landed on Starlink,
Mhm.
and we've explained what Starlink is before on the show, but for those watching afresh, it's the Tesla backed, so it's all Elon Musk basically, or Elon Muskified, I suppose. low Earth orbit satellite constellation stuff, theoretically anywhere on the planet, including obviously
Yeah.
your farm. What was the process of like getting Starlink like?
So the word about Starlink has spread pretty well around rural areas, especially around here. Every man and his dog wants it. So there is like an 18-month waiting list. I think they're already overburdened. And so I had to do a bit of dodginess to get it in time. I wasn't waiting 18 months because I'd be back at home. Uh, so I lied and said I was at my work address, and they didn't apparently weren't overburdened in Mitchell in Canberra. So they sent it to me there, and I just prayed to the internet gods that it would work when I got home.
It's not one of those things like some telcos do that, oh, you've moved this, it won't work anymore. It's supposed to be at this address.
No, it tells you you're not registered for this address, but it doesn't stop you using it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And what kind of costs are we talking here? Because I guess one of the things with the NBN in theory is that as long as they'll approve it for your property, they're meant to kind of cover that stuff if you're within their supply window. Starlink's obviously a private business.
Yeah, so there's an $800 initial setup. They charge you $150 as a deposit, which you can get back at any time. That puts you in the waiting list for it. And then when it's ready to send out, they charge you the rest. So that's covers the cost of the satellite and the Wi-Fi router that comes with it.
And you put the dish up yourself? Like, how do you know that it's pointed in the right direction?
Okay, so that comes with an app, and that tells you it does an obstruction measure of the sky, and it tells you the best place to put the satellite. The satellite dish actually aligns itself, and it moves
cool.
around as you use it. So it'll actually track the satellites going past and move on its own accord to keep best contact with that satellite.
I'm getting this image of you walking around on a barn roof with an app.
It was pretty similar. I had it on the roof of a caravan for a while, and then I ended up getting a couple of guys that I knew that do cabling and stuff to come and install it on the roof properly. So, yeah.
Okay, and so that gets you off the ground in terms of the hardware.
Yep.
What about month-to-month broadband costing?
It's $130 a month, and it's unlimited as far as downloads or uploads go. So it's pretty similar to what I was paying for my 250 megabit connection in town. Same sort of unlimited downloads and things like that. The speeds aren't as good as that. It varies greatly depending minute to minute on speeds that you get.
And how would that stack up to if you got on NBN satellite?
Oh, it's significantly better than NBN satellite.
That's
So
Skymaster.
the NBN satellite at the property that I live on gets about 25 megabits at best, about 10 megabits at peak times. This never drops below 50. Very rarely, I should say, drops below 50. And usually hovers around the 70 to 80 mark. Can get up to 150. I've seen it that, but yeah, there's quite a variance between speeds, I guess.
The kicker I know you're a gamer.
Mm.
The kicker for a lot of gamers would be things like latency and dropouts. What's your experience been like there?
So dropouts are a bit of a problem, and I have a feeling that's because I'm in an overburdened area, and it drops out. It seems to drop out about once every 20 minutes or so, and it only ever drops out for like 5 to 6 seconds. Most things handle that sort of dropout pretty well. Like Netflix is really good with it. Amazon Prime's really good with it. Disney not so much. Gaming is not good with it. Destiny boots you, Elder Scrolls Online boots you. I had to do a review of Forza Horizon and a lot of online content there, so I had to end up doing that at work. I stayed back late at work with my Xbox connected to my computer monitor so I could do the review, just so I could get a stable connection. Otherwise, like single-player experiences are fine. You don't have any problems at all. It seems multiplayer, obviously, you'll get dropouts and you'll probably end up dying a lot, but it is possible. The kids still seem to manage to play Fortnite enough, so they haven't complained too much.
Are those dropouts because you're switching between satellites? Because I assumed that these were geosynchronous satellites like the Skymaster satellites, but if you're tracking a satellite across the sky,
Yep.
then once that disappears over the horizon, your dish needs to find another
Find a new one,
satellite.
yeah.
Is that what's
I
going on?
believe what's what the case is, and there's like you get a info sheet every month from Starlink once you signed up, and they're talking about putting more satellites in
It's not
as
gonna
soon
that
as they
problem's
can.
never gonna go. If I'm right and that's what the problem is, then they'll never be able to not have dropouts at all because they'll always have to hand over from one satellite to the next one.
So what I understand, the people that are using it in different areas that I've spoken to have no problems at all with dropouts.
Okay.
So I got this on the recommendation of the our IT contractor that works in my office, and he'd been using it for about 8 months, and he said he very rarely got a dropout. Generally, only in like high wind, sort of stormy conditions
Yeah.
would he get dropouts. So I have a feeling it's because I did the dodgy to get it to
Yeah.
my address early, and that's probably what's causing the issue.
It's an interesting one. I mean, looking at a lot of the US sites that have done reviews of it,
Mm,
some of them noted that they had fairly regular dropouts
yep.
for correct addresses as well. So
Okay.
it's always a bit of a, I think it's always a bit of a challenge for that, what is still
That
long distance
technology, yeah.
broadband and satellite broadband. Um, and I wonder about the subscription rate of it as well. I mean, I'm sure some of that 18-month wait period is because chip shortages, which we covered on the show before
Yeah.
as well, and shipping and all those kind of challenges.
Yes.
But also, obviously, they don't want to saturate
The
their
areas, yeah.
satellites, so that people can't get a service. It's the core reason why NBN Co limits the speed on its satellites, is
Yep.
so that effectively everyone can have a go.
Yeah. And it feels like really does around here that it's a victim of its own success, because it seemed about 8 months ago people just started hearing about it, and since then it's just exploded because the area is so poorly serviced. There's a lot of people in this area that don't live in the Canberra city limits or in bigger towns surrounding. There is a lot of rural people here, and they all need the internet because they're all public servants. They're not farmers as such. They're public servants living on smaller properties just outside of town. And they've all got kids. They've all got work from home commitments. So Starlink became enormous in the space of no time. So it's this victim of its own success around here.
So because you're not in the middle of nowhere, is it fair to assume that these are areas that under Labor's original plan, whereas 93% of the country would have got fibre, that where you are now probably would have got fibre?
I'm thinking that it originally would have. It's been a long time since I looked at those old maps.
Yeah.
But I think it did, because I remember talking to my in-laws about setting it up for them. So I think it was going to be on the list to get fibre. At the moment, we don't even have a phone line out there, so like not even an old copper line. So it's
I thought they had to provide that. How can they
they
not?
do if you call them, but
If you call,
Yeah.
if
If
you
you call them
arc
on the
up
phone line
about
you don't
it,
have.
yeah.
if you arc up
Basically, if
about
you-
it,
if-
they do
Very
it.
old school telecoms.
It
Yeah.
is. It is very old school. If you make a complaint, they'll come and put one in, but that's about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be an Elon Musk project without bold future claims.
Does it run on Bitcoin?
They've probably they've announced a premium Starlink tier as well for businesses. I think it's like from the second half of the year
Yeah.
of up to like 500 meg, but it's not cheap, is it?
No, I thought it was like $500 a month or something like that. That's not cheap. But I can understand the need for it. Like there are so many businesses in the bush that have no connection to the world, and in this day and age, that's a death knell for your business in a lot of cases. You need to be connected, otherwise you're going nowhere.
So do you reckon that Starlink puts pressure on NBN to lift its game with Sky Muster and fixed wireless, or do you think that it lets NBN off the hook?
Look, I without getting too rude about the current folk
Go
in
for it.
charge.
Don't hold back.
Yeah, I think they're just happy that someone's filling the gap and someone's not constantly whinging about the terrible job they did with the NBN rollout. So I think they're kind of happy that businesses stepped in and taken the blame, I guess, taken the responsibility.
I'm going to do something unusual here and defend NBN on this one.
Oh,
Ooh.
we're
'Cause
through the
well, no.
looking glass here, people.
I think for Sky Muster, they always had that challenge that, unlike Starlink is a private business and they can say to you, yes, we'll give you business, or no, we won't. If they take the viewpoint, for example, oh, look, Australia's gobbling up all of our data and our American customers can't get any, then they'll slow that down to a trickle, and they can do that because they're a private business.
Yeah.
NBN Co was in a position where they said, right, for this, and I think the original plan was something like 3%. That is off the top of my head. Don't at me. But I think about 3% was meant to be covered, but it was a huge swathe of the physical country because you've got lots of truly remote Australians who need that kind of coverage. And it was always going to be difficult to do that in a fair and balanced way, making sure people had access. That's not exactly what Starlink is doing. It's sort of the way people are using Starlink, but it's not exactly the mission that NBN had or were given or altered over time because so many more people suddenly found, oh, no, wait, we're actually now a satellite town where we were going to be fiber or maybe Wi-Fi or, we've been downgraded because it's easier on the balance sheet. That they're guilty of, but that's a different kind of problem.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a sense of, that's just how it is out there. And you speak to locals and they've kind of given up hope of anything better. It's just like this resigned look on their face and say, yeah, it's the cost of living in the bush. And they say in the bush, but like I said, I'm 10 minutes from work, a major industrial suburb. Just down the road is HQ Jock, which is the headquarters of defence in Australia, which presumably
I'm sure they've got good,
has
just
a good
tap
connection.
Into theirs. Just run a cable
I
over
get
the
this
fence.
feeling they might
won't
not
care.
share well.
No, they don't share well, but they can get the tech there, I'm sure. So.
At risk of repeating myself, isn't this what the bloody NBN was supposed to fix? The fact that people in the country just go, we just always have to get second rate. Isn't this the whole point of the NBN?
I thought it was, but there's just this resigned sigh every time you mention the internet to anyone in the area. They just go, and that's about it, really.
So you're out there for a renovation, but you are presumably hoping to return to your freshly renovated property, and what I'm guessing is either a fibre or cable connection.
Yeah, fibre to the home. Yeah,
within a period of time. Sweet fibre. What's your plan for your Starlink satellite when you do that?
So the satellite will stay there. We're staying in a granny flat. My in-laws bought a place down the coast, and they live down there predominantly. And my brother-in-law runs the farm, so they come back and live at the granny flat when they want. So they want the internet up there, and they'll just leave it up there and run it themselves. So it'll stay on the farm.
It's not just a Starlink-only story, though, because one of the big Australian telco players has some ambition in this space, don't they, Adam?
Yeah, well, it's you sort of got to read between the lines a little bit. But Telstra's just signed a deal with Viasat, and what they're doing, that's a global satellite internet provider. But what Telstra is doing is laying the groundwork for their infrastructure in Australia and the fibre to support their network. Telstra says that it has no plans to offer a retail product or service at this stage, but Viasat was pretty blunt about wanting to compete with Starlink, so they might come here to straight out compete with Starlink. Someone like Telstra might white label them or do a deal with them. So there's more competition coming, which I would assume would be great if you want to take advantage of the competition and bring the prices down. Not so great if you like looking at the stars at night, because we just have stupid number of satellites. Plus, Alex, I'm thinking off the top of my head, is it Bezos is doing a similar sort of thing, wants to put up a shed load of satellites, a few other people as well?
I believe so. I mean, the Telstra angle on this is interesting. As someone who grew up in the bush, and Matt, you may agree or disagree with this, Telstra has that kind of interesting reputation of, right, well, they're there, and for a lot of people in regional and rural Australia, they're your only option for things like mobile, if it's there at all. So they're kind of, it's great that they're there, but we sort of don't like them as much because they're kind of expensive. It would not shock me, and of course they said they don't have retail plans. To be fair, it would not shock me if Telstra branded Viasat was perhaps a little more exy than Starlink.
Yeah, Telstra's that bad smell that hangs around it you just can't get rid of because no one else wants to come in and compete with it. So
Telstra, a necessary evil.
Yeah, pretty
that
much.
should be their tagline in the bush.
Okay, well, hopefully your renovation goes well and Starlink picks up for you.
Yes.
Thanks so much for your time, Matt. It is now time for you to face the vertical hold 3 questions of doom.
Okay.
I'm going to ask all 3, and then you can answer them in any order you like.
Am I going to cast into a pit of doom if I get them wrong? Or
Who told him? I suppose that's the big surprise at the end.
The Pit of Doom is undergoing renovations as
Okay,
well at
right,
the
yeah,
moment,
good.
so
Yep.
it's really hard to get lava shipped into the country. So, where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on social media? And our current contentious question du jour: if you could pick any animal to be made into a robot, extinct or living, what would it be and why?
Right, that's a tough one. Well, the easy part is you can find all my work at player2.net.au. We're an independent games site where we just waffle on about video games because that's what we do. Huso81 on Twitter. That's the best place to find me if you care. It's just me ranting a lot about things that I don't agree with. But hey, if you want to jump in, please do. And as for a robot, well, that's a tough one. Do we have control over said robot?
Yeah, I think so. This
You
is
think
this is
so?
all based off a robot cat that was at CES, and
Oh, robot cat. Okay.
you had control over that. So yeah, this is not a Jurassic Park robot
Situation,
animal
right? Yeah,
taking
not
over yet.
yet. Okay. I would say like a bird of prey of some kind, like an eagle or something like that. I reckon, that'd be come in handy at times, especially living in the bush. Go and get your post from town, pick up some milk while you're there.
Catch a
That's
rabbit for dinner.
How
yeah,
very
yeah, that's it.
how very Borderlands.
It is. You've got to use what you've got, right?
Fabulous. Thanks so much for your time, Matt.
It's been a pleasure.
So, with Samsung announcing the next gen of its Galaxy S phones, it seemed only apt that we have the next gen in the studio to talk to us about them. Jen, what did Samsung have to show off with the Galaxy S22?
Well, firstly, I would just like to say that I'm the original Gen, but anyway. And so Samsung largely just went through a process of confirming rumors. There is so much of this phone that has been leaked. It is astonishing. And like even for leaks, like they were pretty good leaks. We knew that there was going to be, phishing phishing net involved in some of these phones. We knew that there'd be massive cameras. We knew that there'd be a massive screen in this one, and that's absolutely what we got. So we got an Ultra, the S22 Ultra, which is the big daddy or mother, depending on what gender it is. I haven't looked under the hood. We got the S22 regular. We got the S22 plus. So 6.1, 6.6, 6 point massive. And there's an S Pen involved in the makings of these phones, where normally the S series would never see a stylus, even though that starts with the same letter.
Well, they did do an S Pen for the S21 Ultra last year. Like, it would work with the S Pen if you had one or bought one. This time around, though, for the Ultra only, they've gone a bit more notish because it actually fits within the phone, doesn't it?
It does. So it's really built into that thing, and you should absolutely not try to put it in the wrong way round, as happened one year with the Note. But yeah, it's really interesting because obviously. That was something that only came out with the Note traditionally. That was something that, people would buy the Note for, as well as the big screen. Now you've got the big screen and the S Pen, and all of the camera smarts of a flagship phone. So it's kind of like we don't have a Note on the market anymore.
So
Should we
is
be
the
pouring
note
one out for the
officially
Note?
dead? Yeah.
I think it's officially dead. So I talked to Samsung Australia, who said, I doubt very much this is coming back into the portfolio, which means, yes, we're pouring one out. I think maybe we should light a candle on the basis of that whole.
Samsung don't like you mentioning fires, Jen.
Yeah, I
Especially not
know.
around notes.
It's
I
a touchy
know, but
point.
that does remind me of that very particular time that we had, that really big moment. So yeah, I mean, it is sad though, because the Note was really a pioneering device, and so officially, this is the year that we say goodbye to that pioneering device.
So does the Ultra replace the Note completely for you as someone who's a fan of the Note? Does the Ultra do the job?
I've got to say, like, because I was a fan of the Note, I think that probably for me, the Fold is more a replacement for the Note. So it kind of happened earlier, and that's one of the devices that will work with an S Pen, even though it doesn't come with one. You can buy like a case with one. You can buy one additionally. And that seems to be like the big kind of, productive device that you would use in place of a note rather than this one. This is a nice to have though. And honestly, the number of documents that people want me to sign this week and I can't because, who has a printer? Um, it's actually quite a nice to have and could fit in very nicely into our lives.
The Fold's a weird one though because it has its own S Pen. It'll only work with its own ones, whereas this and other S Pen compatible devices will stretch back or forward quite a bit. But that's because it's got that soft, weird plastic screen. Jen, I know you're someone also who loves a good camera on a phone. Um, at a specs level, just at a raw number level, though, looking at the Ultra, and I've had a bit of hands-on time with one as well. Um, it all feels a bit familiar if you've tested the S21 Ultra, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I feel bad for Samsung in a way because on paper, when you're looking at a side by side comparison, it isn't obvious that there's been a big upgrade. But you can upgrade cameras without making it look like that on a sheet of paper, unless you print out the photos. That's kind of where the difference comes in. I think there's been a lot more raw support. And I'm not saying that they're copying from Apple's handbook here, but it feels like it. There's a lot more raw support. You can potentially download an extra app so that you can actually, take photos from this device, and you could, make them a lot better because you'll have a lot more information to be going with your raw files if you're into that sort of thing, which I absolutely am. And also with this stuff, they've done a lot with portrait mode. And I always find it interesting when Samsung talk about portrait mode because previously they didn't call it that. And
Mm.
so even the fact that they're calling it portrait mode is a bit of a nod to Apple. Now they're saying that they've improved the artificial intelligence in these devices so that they can tell if you've got a stray hair, for example, coming out, and making sure that that is in focus, a straw, and it doesn't look weird when they try to put in that kind of, fake aperture control.
They've got a bit of a catch-up game to play, in my estimation, against both Apple and Google in this space. Not that the last year's S21 and especially the S21 Ultra was a bad camera phone. It's just it's aged a bit, and the market has moved on a little bit in that premium space.
Yeah, and I think definitely, I mean, as it pertains to Google as well, because the Google Pixel phone was amazing when it comes to, computational photography. So not just using the hardware in the device, but actually using smarts to make those photos look so much better. And I think that that's really what Samsung is catching up with in this device. And I've only had like a day with it to actually, test it out. Um, I'm really grateful that they added, improvements for pet photography as well, because that's what I take photos of when
Who
I'm
doesn't
testing
need
these
cat
cameras.
photos? Hmm.
Everybody, the internet needs cat photos. It's based on it. And so they do so far do a really good job, and especially in low light, because that's one thing that Samsung has really chosen to hone in on this year as well.
Yeah, I'm really keen to actually put them kind of head to head and work out where they sit. They were competitive last year for sure, but again, I think they got overtaken just a touch. And competition's good for everyone, of course.
It
But it's
is, and I love to see the raw stuff too come in, and like that was really sort of it was in a Google phone, even though it was hard to use. Apple really refined it. Samsung's coming in now, so hopefully people won't look at me strangely when I talk about raw photos in future.
But these photo improvements, it's not just AI and software, is it? They've actually got a bigger sensor in these phones?
Yeah, so there are bigger pixels involved, which is always good for low light photography. And I think one of the things for my eyes that Samsung has really sort of needed to improve on is its handling of night photography of photography in low light, because sometimes they really push the ISO up super hard and it shows in the photos, and it like when I see a photo like that I instantly think, yeah, that was taken with the phone. And it would be great if they can kind of smooth out that process and make some refinements there. And definitely having a larger image sensor will make that a lot easier.
they're also doing some smart stuff, as they explained it to me, between the ultra wide and the standard wide lens in terms of getting even more light into the sensor to help with that exact kind of ISO problem. On the hardware front, there's a kind of good news, bad news story here from my perspective. On the bad news side, they're 5G, but they're still only sub 6. They're not millimeter wave. I don't get that at all. On the good news front, though, we're getting the Qualcomm version here in Australia. And for those who aren't familiar with that, Samsung has all pretty much always done two tiers of Galaxy S phones. their own Exynos processors, slightly cheaper, slightly less quick. Not huge, but a bit compared to the Qualcomm variants, which were usually the US and China only. Jen, am I just obsessing over technical details that nobody cares about, or do these things actually matter?
I think people care about when they go wrong. I think everybody else just goes, "Oh yeah, no, that sounds good. Oh, it works faster." So yeah, I mean, ultimately it will be a better experience, and I think that's what people need to pay attention to. But normally with these things, if your new phone isn't faster, then yeah, uproar, danger in the streets.
Last year was a good example actually, where I do think it mattered because it made a difference to things like photo processing. People did head-to-head Exynos and Qualcomm tests on the same Samsung phones and found they were getting better photos consistently on the Qualcomm variant. So really, really good and encouraging to see. But it's a weird mix globally. Like I think a lot of Europe's still getting an Exynos version.
Did they
Uh,
give reasons why, or is it probably just supply chain?
They did not specify to me as to why that was happening. One of the things that Samsung routinely does, and this is a bit kind of inside journalism in a way, when they put out spec sheets for these phones, they'll just simply say, typically the build size of the processor, they'll say like 4 nanometer processor, 7 nanometer processor, or octa-core processor, whatever. They will not specify. You have to chase them on this. So I did, and I got told, yeah, we're getting the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, not the Exynos 2200, I think it is off the top of my head, in these phones, but there will be variants. So if you import one, by the way, for listeners, if you are importing one through the direct importers, you might get the other one. Speaking of the other one, the other side of this story, of course, was tablets. Samsung's been in the tablet game for a good long time. What's big this year, Jen?
The screens, as I understand it, the screens in these devices are getting a lot bigger. So, potentially, with the top model, we're seeing, a 14.5 inch screen. Like it's
14.6, I think. Yeah.
six. Yeah, I mean, it's a whopping great screen for a tablet. So, I mean, that's useful, and I think Samsung really needs to kind of differentiate itself in a way. Yes, it's probably like one of the last the last companies rather, that is actually pumping out Android tablets. And so it's good to have that competition in the market. Why not create like a mega tablet for people to use? Because at least that's something different. Typically, when people buy tablets, however, they're from the Apple camp. And so I think they really have an uphill battle against that, particularly when you've got, companies and schools and those sorts of organizations really sort of in the Apple camp quite firmly, and with all of their software that runs really important. um, I've just set one up for school, so I know this. So yeah, really important kind of management software on them. I think it's still going to be the also ran of the Samsung family.
I noticed that all the new Tab S8s work with the S Pen. May even come with an S Pen. Is
They
that
do. They
is
do.
that new, or is it have the last few been like that as well?
Yeah, typically with Microsoft products, like you have to buy all of the accessories, including
Yeah,
the pen and the keyboard,
keyboard.
and it's really ridiculous because nobody buys a Surface, or very few people at least buy a Surface with the idea that they're going to use it just as a tablet
Yeah,
with the use of their fingers. I think Samsung with the last one, they did include an S Pen. I've got it right in front of me, and that's incredibly handy. I like that they're bundling these things together, and so that you don't have to buy a million things in addition to the things that you've just purchased.
because Apple doesn't do that. Even with the high end iPad Pro, they don't throw in a pencil, do they?
No, absolutely not. That'll be an extra. I think last I looked, it was like $119, but maybe it's more than that now.
They're not. They're certainly not cheap. And the inclusion of the S Pen is nice. I've had the chance to actually do some hands on with the Galaxy Tab S8, and you're right, Jen. The Tab S8 Ultra is huge. I mean, it's actually kind of bigger than you think it's going to be. Reasonably light for its size, but really quite hard to hold. I was trying to photograph it. Well, yeah, holding one phone and holding the Tab S8 Ultra in the other, and I came so close to dropping it a bunch of times, which is a great way to freak out demonstration people, but it's not a good idea for a tablet you want to buy. But I know you're someone who really likes specifically the iPad Pro. I've seen you work off an iPad Pro countless times, and this is really a direct iPad Pro competitor, isn't it? It's not really taking on your standard iPad or Mini or things like that.
No, absolutely. And I think anybody who buys a tablet of that size is going to buy it with a specific reason in mind. And so, for example, I use the iPad Pro a lot to edit photos. And for editing photos, I imagine that this one's going to be quite useful. And so potentially, Lightroom comes into play and those sorts of things. And you can use the S Pen in those cases to really kind of refine your images. And that makes perfect sense. However, if you're going to use this to put in your handbag and take to work with you, I think maybe you're going to have to go down the list and buy a different S8.
Or a much bigger handbag.
I'm
Much bigger handbag.
also okay with that too.
Speaking of the S Pen, one of the weird and interesting things, and this is actually across the Tab S8 and the S22 Ultra, is they're saying that the S Pen is now a lot more predictive. So it's actually going to think about where it thinks you're going to draw next to lower latency. This is an S Pen and a screen that knows what's going on in your brain.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, if it knows what I'm going to write next, maybe it should just do the work for me. And in that case, bring
Give
it
me
on.
500 words of Black Sabbath.
Not particular, but yeah, I get the idea. Yes, absolutely. And if it knows my writing style, how can I improve it? Yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, I tried the S Pen out on the new phone, for example, on the Ultra, and it did seem faster. It made a very loud, fake scratching noise on the screen, which still freaks me out a little bit. But it was very fast, and I'm all for making these S Pens, these digital styli better.
Does Apple do that as well? Because I know I've tested something in the past where I've been to a demo and they told me the same thing, that this thing is taking a guess at what you're about to do next to speed things up. But I can't remember the product or where I was or anything. It's all a blur.
Well, you'd left the house, so I'm guessing it wasn't recent.
No, it was not recently. Does the Pencil do that?
As I haven't heard it in relation to the Pencil, the Apple Pencil. However, I haven't found that the lag on the Apple Pencil is a terrible issue either. And so I remember, like in the early days of the S Pen, it was always a bit of a drama because you'd write and you'd kind of wait for it to appear, and that's always kind of annoying and messes with your process a little bit. So the fact that these things are faster is ultimately good for people who are using them. I wonder how many people will use them, and now, in particular, because they're bundled with these tablets and they're bundled with the phones. Are people going to start bringing back the stylus and the Palm Pilot style of like using phones more readily? I don't know.
My graffiti muscle memory might actually get a workout after 20 plus years.
I could dig out my Palm Trio.
Bring back the bubble letters.
Oh God. Jen, you mentioned actually the Galaxy Fold, and there's a weird bit of continuity between the Fold and the new Tab S8s that I discovered while I was demoing it. Because one of the issues that Android tablets have had, especially relative to iPads, is lots of Android apps are lousy on tablets, not specifically the Tab S8, but they just don't scale up well to those screen form factors. The designers don't think about them. And one of the things the Fold does pretty well is multitasking different apps and like shoving them into different corners of that unfolded screen. The Tab S8 does the same thing. Do you think that's enough of an advantage for an Android tablet for someone who might be on the fence thinking, oh, well, I could get the Android one or I could get the iPad Pro?
I think it is definitely an advantage, and because Samsung have done so much work with Google to kind of make that a better process and make it much easier. However, Microsoft, I know nobody really wants to talk about their folding phone, the Duo, but it does a pretty good job of that too. And I've done some experiments with like Samsung's last tablet as a result, where you can kind of save a screen with multiple apps on the screen and actually access it really quickly from the sidelines. And I think that some of these things, I think Samsung doesn't necessarily do enough education about because they are absolutely useful. And so I would love to see a bit more competition between the Android and the iPhone, the iOS tablets in the world. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen with this one, but I hope so, because look, the more competition, the more stuff that we get to pick apart and play with, and I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Look, speaking of the Surface Duo, I'm just waiting on the third version. We all know that's when Windows products get good. You wait for the third one.
And hopefully when you open it all the way around, like it won't absolutely slam into the cameras on the back of the device, because that was kind of concerning for me. Yes. But look, third time's a charm. I'm ready to go. And I will say, like, in terms of making things better as well, like Samsung's tablets have been getting better over time. I'm interested to see what they do with the giant tablet. But these things have actually quietly been getting better in the background.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. thanks to Matt for making time for the show a little earlier, and for Jen for once again joining us in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Jen, you, I think, more than most have faced the vertical hold 3 questions of doom, but you're getting them again because why not? As usual, 3 questions, answer them in any order you like, and with any answers you like, I suppose. Where can people find your work online? Where can they find your social media online? And bearing in mind that super creepy cat with no head that we saw at CES, the robot one, what other animal should be recreated as a robot and why?
That is a big question. I'm going to politics this up and answer something else. You can find me on Twitter at Jen Dudley because I'm always there. And you can find my work across all the News Corp mastheads like Daily Telegraph, Herald Sun, those sorts of things. And as for what animal you could bring back in robot form, it's definitely not a dog because those weird, like walking dog things absolutely freak me out. So I'm going to say smart birds.
That's the second smart bird suggestion we've had on the show this week. It's a trend, people.
There's some
Well,
market
get
research
on
for
it.
you.
Smart birds. Let's
It
make
was
it happen.
good enough for the dinosaur revolution. I can't see what could possibly go wrong.
I, for one, welcome our new flying robot overlords. But before they take over, you can catch us online at Vertical Hold AU on Twitter, at verticalhold.com.au, or via the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
And as always, thanks everyone for dropping by. Don't forget to leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice and help us spread the good word. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. And thanks everyone for tuning in once again. And I don't know what I'm going to say next.
You and me both.
I just can't do it.